Hey there everybody, and welcome to RPG Horror Story Cringe with DnD Doge. In today's episode, we have a tale about a player that wants to call the make-believe cops on another player in an anime-style tabletop RPG. A story about a replacement DM that proves that sometimes games should just fizzle out. And more. But before we get into those, I have to ask that if you like what I do here, that you roll a crit on that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and even share the video if you feel so inclined. Not only does it help out the channel a lot, but it also makes Nipsey extremely happy.
Yes, I really like that. I also really like this banana.
Some might say that he's bananas for likes. I'm sorry. Let's just get into the stories. Player has his character call the cops on my character. Derails campaign in first session. By Reddit user, Last Word Slinger. This one was from many years ago, back in my college days. Me and some friends of friends decided to play BESM campaign. For those not in the know, BESM is a system that lets you play anime-style games of any type. Giant mech, Sentai, school drama. If it was an anime, you could recreate its style with BESM. There were several players, but the only pertinent ones to the story are myself, the GM, and the problem player that we'll call Teacher. We were going to do a modern, unlikely allies come together to fight evil kind of thing. My character was going to be a juvenile delinquent, akin to Yasuki from Yu Yu Hakusho or Onizuka from GTO. I wanted him to be a normal guy that, as the campaign progressed, would discover that he had special powers, something that the system allowed. However, at the start, I had no powers or abilities, and was just a regular dude. Teacher built his character to be a teacher at my character's school, who was supposed to be kind of an arrogant genius mad scientist. Think of a more jackassy Washu from Tenchi, or Lloyd from Code Geass. Honestly, I have never watched a single one of those animes, so all of that just went way over my head. So, we get started, and in the first session, we're doing some roleplay before the plot starts. At one point, Teacher and my character are interacting. My character had been skipping class, and Teacher was trying to blackmail him into being his guinea pig in some experiments, or he'd get me expelled. I agreed, thinking that it would be fun roleplay. Maybe Teacher would discover my character's hidden powers or something. Nope, the whole thing was a thinly veiled excuse to physically torture my character with his gadgets and verbally abuse him. It was a bit off-putting and frustrating, in character and out of character. Finally, my character, and I, had it, and did what I believed my character would do. Punch the Teacher and tell him to go to hell and expel my character if he wanted. Now, remember, my character was a regular dude, so no powers or abilities, and I specifically told the GM that I wasn't trying to hurt Teacher. The GM agreed it's what my character would do, and thought it would set up a good rivalry between our characters, so he allowed it. Well, Teacher was not happy about it. How dare anyone strike his clearly superior character? "I call the cops on him." We all paused. "What?" the GM asked. "He hit a teacher. I'm getting him arrested." So the police came and arrested my character. The GM kept trying to give Teacher in-game ways to back off of this, but Teacher wasn't having any of it. GM said, "He's just a kid. We could give him a warning." "No, I want him to go to jail." "We could fine him and let him go." "No, I want him prosecuted." So the rest of the session is the GM trying to deal with my character being arrested, in jail, and going to court, etc. All the while with Teacher being relentless in getting what he wanted. In retrospect, there were a number of things that GM could have done to bypass or fix this, but we were all 18 to 22. Not the most experienced at good GMing just yet. The awkward tension at the end of the session was palpable from everyone else. Not only were they mostly sidelined to deal with teacher shenanigans, but also agreed, I later found out, that he was being a douche nozzle. No one wanted to play the game after that, and I and my character never found out what his secret powers were going to be. Well, it certainly sounds like Teacher was a bit too testy with his character, demanding that everything get put on pause so he can press charges on a fictional character with his fictional character is a bit much. But at the same time, the GM should have thought of a better way to deal with the situation besides going through a whole fictional legal system, while the other players were just sitting there wondering what the hell was going on. Or just straight up tell Teacher that he's being a drama queen. But like OP said, they were all young. Hopefully, GM learned how to put his foot down on certain things, and Teacher learned how not to be such a douche nozzle. Let's move on. My Worst DM by Reddit user YouHowHowMao. Since college, I've kind of been the forever GM, hence my profile name, so I've kind of jumped at the chance to play any time that it's offered. The following story happens around mid-2006, so it's an oldie but a goodie. I join a BESM game with two of my roommates, one of my roommate's buds, and the GM, who is a peripheral friend, and I think he was the friend's roommate. BESM is a kind of anime-style game, so lots of over-the-top things happen, and it kind of has that sort of feel. It was advertised as kind of a sci-fi fantasy game, with a 6 months into the future setting, so we roll up our characters and get into our first game. So there's me, playing a lizard folk engineer gunslinger type. My intent was to craft tools and devices on the fly, helping out with the fact that resources would be scarce. One roommate, I'll call him Bruce, plays a kung fu fighter type, lots of kicks and punches and counters and grapples. Roommate 2, I'll call him Tank, plays a kind of tanky guy with divine magic. I don't remember the class name, but it's basically a paladin. Friend, that I'll call Zuko, is playing a firebender basically. Years before Avatar, mind you, but still, fire spells only. They reskinned any magic spell into a fire variant. Game 1 goes okay. We all meet up with our source, who tells us about the cult who want to revive some great evil and bring the world to its knees. He gets killed by one of these cultists, so we go rushing off to fight. This is where the first 2 red flags pop up. Every enemy is equipped with a ranged weapon and has ridiculous speed, and most of them are wearing heat-proof armor. Bruce cannot get into melee range easily, and Zuko can't damage any of the enemies. Red flag 3 happens when the last cultist grabs my character and warps us all through time. We wake up in a prison cell in a fantasy world. At first, I'm like, oh neat, this is a pretty cool Chrono Trigger sort of story twist. Take our fight through time and keep the world from breaking. But no, we get out, and now we're basically only in the past. My character is pretty much useless, because I have no access to anything electronic or mechanical, and I have limited bullets. He's continuing with the ranged weapon and fireproof enemies through the rest of this campaign, but I'm hoping that he'll at some point bounce us back to the future so I can restock. But after he gives me a sword that I can use instead of my guns, I realize that that's probably not happening, keeping in mind that my character is dex-based, not strength-based. So I do barely any damage. I'm forced to take levels that can help with the only way I'm basically doing any damage, so now I'm triple classed, and I'm not happy. Finally, after near the whole semester, he leaps us back to the future. I spend the downtime between sessions putting together a plan to keep my character from running out of materials and bullets, by building a robot capable of full Metal Alchemist style transmutation. I pumped something like 3 of my own class levels into this creation, so I'm now 3 levels behind the rest of the players. As expected, we're back in the fantasy past, and I get my robot online, only to find out that the DM wants to control it and make it do things that only he wants it to do. That's not how it's supposed to work, so I tell him that I'd rather not. And his compromise instead is that every time I want it to do a thing, he flips a coin, and if it gets heads, it doesn't do it. I feed it some coins to make bullets, and the thing doesn't comply. I've wasted 3 levels and a bunch of money for a thing that has a 50% chance of saying nope. My character ends up dying because he makes me roll a bunch of skill checks in a row that I can't make, strength-based, high DC, and I fall out of an airship and take hundreds of points of damage. After that, I just took my sheet and walked away. Edit. Nothing bad happened to Tank, but that's because his player is like the nicest guy, and I think the GM had a crush on him, which isn't surprising, cause everyone had a crush on Tank. Yeah, that seems a bit messed up for the Game Master to essentially only make encounters that seem to counteract the player builds. Then to essentially make OP's character useless by not allowing them to have their resources to play their character. And then the bullcrap with OP's solution to that, and the coin flip thing, was a bit much. A good GM could still do the time travel thing, but easily come up with a way that OP could still get the things that he needed to use their character effectively. Not just give them a sword and say, good luck. I think the GM had a me versus the players mentality, especially considering how they basically made OP keep rolling high DC checks until he fell off of an airship. At that point, it sounds like the GM was mad that OP didn't want them controlling the robot that OP spent 3 levels into, and just wanted revenge for that. So, OP leaving that whole clown show was probably for the best. Let's move on. DM ruins campaign with his disgusting Mary Sue DMPC out of spite. By Reddit user, Dr. Frog MD. I joined a D&D group a couple of months ago. I didn't know the group that well, but I decided to step out of my comfort zone and play with some new people. This campaign was set on a continent ruled by a powerful emperor that more or less controlled the continent. When he died, the continent fell into chaos and anarchy as warlords, dark lords, and monsters competed for power. This includes our party, which was actually somewhat in competition with each other, and PvP was frequent. It was an interesting idea, but of course, it got effed up by a bad DM. For context, I was playing as a homebrew Blood Elf Warlock, who is from an island and is from an elite bloodline. As we get to playing, we begin with an actual competent DM. He was extremely creative and really incorporated a sense of competitiveness in a fun way, something very few DMs can do. We face off against plenty of interesting DMPCs, and even each other over magic items, land, allies, you name it. But eventually, the DM leaves the campaign to take care of some personal business, which we all understood, and then let his friend take over the campaign. This new DM was apparently his friend from his college's gaming club and had DM'd before. If so, well, my condolences to his former parties. He decides to introduce his favorite bugbear DMPC. I don't even know what the point of the DMPC was in retrospect, except to F up what would have been otherwise a really great game. This DMPC just felt like a problem player character, except the effing DM was playing him. He was a murder hobo and a Mary Sue. He basically faced no consequences for his actions, and the DM would always pull some BS move to bail him out whenever he caused trouble, and he would always steal whatever magic item, land, weapons, slaves, etc. that he wanted. Eventually, my character was able to muster up a good chunk of the party, 3 other players, to fight this DMPC. It was defensive in nature, as this DMPC would always seem to attack me. By all accounts, we should have won. The DMPC was literally created on D&D Beyond, and the DM was not shy about showing us his stats. It was 3-on-1, and 2 of us were even higher level than the DMPC. But of course, the DMPC wins the battle, because the party doesn't arrive on time, so the DMPC is able to focus its attack on my character. I then try to use my magic item, a Horn of Blasting, that should have allowed me to essentially blow him up. But of course, the DM has it blow up in my face because reasons, and then attacks me. Unsurprisingly, he knocks me out, and the other players somehow afterwards are unable to land a hit on the DMPC before he escapes, taking me with him to his lair. Once we are there, the DM basically decides that he's gonna just start overtly railroading the hell out of my character, and making him write a memoir before he dies. And in the memoir, he basically invalidates my entire backstory. He makes me admit that I'm not a Blood Elf elite, but just a Wood Elf peasant that wants to be a Blood Elf elite and lied about my heritage. I specified in my backstory with the old DM, and now all my backstory that was integral to my character was gone. He then decides to have his guards rape me repeatedly, and then the Chuckle F decides to roll to see if I quote-unquote like it. He rolls an effing 3, but apparently that passes. So apparently I enjoy getting raped by 2 bugbears. I call him out and tell him that I think he is being spiteful because he doesn't like me for whatever reason. Which he doesn't, but he's also just a crap DM. I honestly probably wouldn't have been so upset if he didn't just completely steal my player agency. But at this point, I give up and just roll a new character. After all of that, OP still decided to stay in this game and make a new player character? Huh. If I were smart, I would have given up the game entirely. But I am dumb, so I roll up a new character that I specifically create to spite the DMPC. Ah, there it is. He's basically a stereotype of bugbears, and I would make him say that in his backstory that he recognizes the inferiority of the bugbear race, and that this is why they have a predilection to rape. Unsurprisingly, the DM didn't allow this as it was metagaming, so I just play some human wizard involved in some dynastic struggle. But I don't put too much thought into my new backstory for obvious reasons. The campaign pretty much just got progressively stupider until it ended without a proper conclusion. Afterwards, we ended up getting a new DM to run this style of competitive flared campaign. He wasn't great, but he was better than that last DM. TLDR, good DM leaves the campaign to a bad DM. Bad DM then uses his annoying Mary Sue DMPC to ruin my character and eventually screw up the whole campaign. Damn, that really sucks. To have a game where everyone is having a great time, only for it to go off the rails when a new DM comes in. It kinda reminds me when you have a job, and you and the boss get along great, but then they get a promotion, and then a new boss comes in and is a tryhard, and makes everyone working their's lives completely miserable. It sounds to me like that bugbear may have been one of the DM's characters in another campaign, and he just wanted to use that character as a power trip. And when it looks like the party may actually defeat him, comes up with stupid ways why they wouldn't win. But then they had to take things further by taking OP's character and doing that stuff to, I guess, humiliate OP? Because how dare he try to defeat his DMPC? It's no wonder why this campaign fell apart, and it makes me wonder why the first good DM thought that this dude would be a good replacement. Thankfully, the group eventually got a new DM, and sure, OP said he wasn't that great, but anything would be a step up from that douche. Let's move on, and as it's Friday, it's time to cap off this video with this week's glory story. Storytime: The Holy Order of the Moose by Reddit user Mezovara. So this is from an encounter from my game that happened last night. The party was traveling to a nearby village, and suddenly they begin hearing really poorly done animal noises. A group of cultists appear from the bushes and state that all travelers who pass through this area must pay a tithe of 1,000 gold pieces per person, or face their champion in ritualistic combat. Important to note, they had just had a gauntlet-style combat session the session before, and had long rested before leaving, but in character, were mentally tired and wanting nothing to do with these guys. The cleric, whose character was a 14-year-old girl, rolled on a high religion check and knew exactly who these guys were, and let out an exasperated sigh. They stated that they were the Knights of the Holy Order of the Moose Table, and ended all of their sentences with "Mrrr," like they were trying to make moose noises. The sorcerer decides to try and deceive the cult, and cast Minor Illusion to make it seem like they had a giant chest of gold, and rolled a natural 20 deception. The head cultist bolted towards the chest, fell through it, and broke their neck, to which the cleric cast Spare the Dying to try and prevent any further escalation. Ultimately, the party had to choose a champion to fight the cult's champion, and chose the sorcerer. Cleric, above game, says, "I swear to God, if it's just a big effing moose." To which I pause for a second and say, as the sorcerer steps forward, the cult begins to chant and call forth their champion from another plane, and then before you stands a huge, spectral moose. After about 3 minutes of the group, myself included, laughing our asses off, the cleric and the NPC bard buff the sorcerer before the fight, and combat begins. What happens then is as follows. Sorcerer shoots the moose with a crossbow bolt, and then moves behind a bush. The moose, not seeing where the sorcerer went, chose to charge in a random direction, ramming into what was essentially a wall of force to prevent interference, and damaging itself. On Sorcerer's turn, he had just gotten a javelin of lightning, said F it, might as well try this out, and rolls a nat 20 and deals 8d6 lightning damage to this moose, effectively shish kebabbing it. It only had like 30 health, and the javelin did like 28 or 29 alone. Afterwards, the party is given an amulet that lets them summon what they just fought once per day, and then the party continued on their way, coming to terms with that fever dream that they all collectively had. I strongly encourage any DM who is trying to come up with a random encounter to try out the Holy Order of the Moose. It was never meant to be hard, but it was so enjoyable. Well, that does sound like an enjoyable encounter, especially as it sounds like the party had a pretty difficult fight just before this. I think it's a good thing when a dungeon master throws stuff like this in a game as a way to blow off some steam and have a laugh every now and then, even in dark campaigns. And I may just be taking up OP's offer and stealing this to put into my first campaign I'm DMing. But that will do it for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games have plenty of laughs in them. Until next time.